The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Rivers Corbett was born to be an entrepreneur. He says on his LinkedIn profile that he was fortunate to discover this path early in his 20s and has been pursuing that path ever since. He's a serial entrepreneur of numerous companies, a TEDx speaker, an author, entrepreneur in residence for the province of New Brunswick here in Canada, the video author of 13 Fears of Entrepreneurs, the host of Startup Canada podcast, and now CEO and founder of ChefTorial. Together with his Ask Rivers team, he specifically works with culinary professionals who wish to start and grow a six-figure virtual business, allowing them to work anywhere, anytime. Rivers has already been leaving the trail of his legacy by creating a community of chefs at ChefTorial that are turning around to help build communities through engaging experiences through food, and it's all peppered with fun. I reached Rivers in his home in Montreal to chat about what connection means to him, how he's learned to be intentional when building connections, and how a sense of humor and a dash of humility can open the door to deeper connections over time. Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Connector Next Door. I'm so excited to be flying across Canada, all the way to Montreal, to my good friend Rivers' home, where you are. You've got a big chef hat on right now.
I do.
Virtually behind you there. But I'm so glad that you're here to chat about connection today.
Thanks. Great to be here. And Lisa, of course, our story is an Academy Award-winning friendship movie for sure. And anytime you ask, I'm there. I look forward to this conversation.
Well, I have been doing a few different interviews over the summer, and it's so interesting when we start talking about connection, because if really we weren't pushed into a virtual world, I don't know that we would have the friendship that we do. So I'm so
totally
thankful. Not obviously for a lot of the things that the negatives that have happened through this pandemic, but a lot of the beauty that has come through this is new friendships that have been made. So I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thanks.
Before we get sort of into the good stuff, because you've got so much going on right now. Tell us what connection means to you. When you think of the word connection, what does that actually mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as you know, when I go into these conversations with you, I don't want a script. I always enjoy the spontaneity of it. Okay, what's she going to ask? And so when you say what is connection, it really comes with different variables to me. There's short-term connections, there's medium-term connections, and there's those deep, long-term, important family and friends, those small circle of connections that come into play. So that's the first thing that comes to my head, is that the connections come and go, and most of them come and go, but and some of them pretty deep. But here's the thing that's interesting for me, is that I try to embrace it, whether it's just going to be for a conversation for 20 minutes or it's going to be for 20 years. I think that's kind of what's best with my attitude when it comes to connections, because, even those short-term 20 minutes are lasting memories, let alone lasting connections. So that's what it means to me.
And every journey starts with one step, right? So you may not even know where that friendship or that first connection might go. Like there might be some kind of spark there. There also, I think you have had your hands in the startup world for so long as well, and working with entrepreneurs and how business relationships, sometimes they start out in a certain fashion and then they morph and change, and over time that there's an adjustment to our connections as well. And that's
Yes.
just maybe you can speak to that a little bit, where there's entrepreneurs that are trying to navigate, and you're letting some relationships or some connections loosen while you're tightening others. Have you seen that happen with some of
Yeah.
the entrepreneurs you
Well,
work with?
yeah. Well, when I work with entrepreneurs, I try to teach them that ultimately this is a game about finding people that can help you achieve your objectives. And sometimes you got to move on from some of the connections because one, they have fulfilled their purpose. Two, you need to go and nurture other opportunities. And so connections from a business perspective are much more related to, okay, initially I've got objectives that I have to achieve for the business. I got to put food on the table. I got to move the numbers forward and so on. And then once you start to work that initial connection, the key is okay, I then encourage them, okay, how are you now going to nurture it? And this is key. I always say business is a dating game. That's all it freaking is. We were talking about you initially dating at the beginning of this conversation and how your husband got lucky to get you. And but all it is a dating game. And so the key is that you nurture if it's bringing value to you, but it's also bringing value to them. That's the key to really solid connections. And in business, if that really isn't happening, it's okay to be friends. It's okay to connect and say, I haven't talked some of my clients. I got a guy who I connected with last December, hadn't talked to him for 8 months. And now we're doing this amazing business deal together. And so you can have those loose connections in business. The key is it's got to bring value to both of you. And that's really what I encourage entrepreneurs to focus in on. It's two-way. Do not get selfish in those connections because they will not serve you well or the other person.
Mm-hmm. And you as a connector, a lot of what this podcast is meant to be is really getting in the heart and the mind and the ways of natural connectors. And I invited you here because you are one of these people that naturally brings people alongside you as you're building and you're creating something new, and you've got a new project that you've been working on the last year and a bit. I guess it's been already. It feels like, yesterday in some ways,
It
but a
does.
long
Yeah.
time in some ways. So what is that for you when you start bringing a community together, that you maybe some things that are really important to you when you're looking for true connection in businesses that you're starting, new ventures that you're starting personally? What are you looking for in those connections?
What I'm looking for, first of all, is how we can serve each other. It really is a business. I mean, one of my business model for the past year has been about learning about how to best deliver my service. We may get into that in a second, but it is now pivoted to, okay, how can I develop deep relationships with organizations so that I can serve them consistently time after time after time. I'm not into what's the word I'm trying to think, the one night stand. I'm not interested in that mode. I'm into nurturing long-term relationships with people that we can bring value to each other. So that's really where my focus is right now. How can I find those smaller groupings of people who have got the type of people within their network that I want to serve? And so I call them honeypots. And so these are honeypot relationships, which nurture all kinds of wonderful opportunity for me. And not that I don't, and not that I don't have the fleeting ones either, but that's really where my focus is now, is to develop those honeypot strategies that give great value long-term. They're deep relationships, they're enriching relationships, the relationships you work on a regular basis. And you only need probably about 20 of those, really, when you think about it, which will give you connections into hundreds of people because of who they're connected with. And so it's the what they call it's the 7 times removed. Well, honeypots, it's only 1 time removed.
Well, and as you were saying, this deep connection and the desire to really invest and take the time, and just as you're saying that, I'm sure a lot of people that are listening are thinking, oh my gosh, who has time to
Yes.
invest so deeply in every relationship. But
Yeah,
just as you said, you don't need a lot of them. And I read an amazing book a couple of years ago of we need to be drilling deeper wells as opposed
100%.
to more wells.
Right.
And when I really took that to heart and put that into my own business plan, and what would that look like for myself, and then really understanding that there are several layers that I just have never had the time, energy, money, all that stuff to really go deep with an organization or with a client, and just to know them so well that you're serving
Right.
them in a different kind of way, that
Yes.
differentiating ourselves from others almost in a way where that relationship potentially could be long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got two daughters, right?
I do.
Yeah. So,
And
and
three stepkids too.
in three
And
steps, you get five.
three grandkids too.
Well, there you go. And so there's all these deep relationships
Yes.
that you nurture individually, and you dive deep into each one of them to nurture this great value that you receive, but also that they receive. But it's eight, or however the number added up to be. And yeah, that's where the value. But this is the key to business, is that you get to choose who you want to ultimately date and to develop that long-term relationship with. And that's where I'm very, very laser focused, as I want to do my research that organization brings great value to spend my time and energy nurturing that relationship. And not again, so it's just on my end, but I also am able to feel good. I can bring them value. So when I write a message, I don't wait in line. They get back to me right away because I become part of their family, just like they're part of my family.
I love it. And this is a great opening maybe for us to chat a little bit about ChefTorial and
Yay.
what a beautiful transition. I have moved away. I've pivoted away from the word pivot because I think a lot of what we're doing these days is just ebbing, flowing, finding new ways to connect with each other. And tell us a little bit about where ChefTorial started and how that was a way for you to actually show up even more so as the connector in your community.
Yeah, so ChefTorial had an original name. It was called the Chef Group, and the Chef Group was all about doing cooking classes for businesses. Businesses like the Sobeys grocery chain organization, which we did thousands of cooking classes for them to educate their customers on how to use certain food, so they go buy the food, blah, blah, blah. COVID came along, took it all away. And I consider COVID probably one of the best blessings that ever happened to me, because what we did is we did pivot. I like the word pivot, actually. And people kind of hang away from it. My attitude is if the National Basketball Association can keep saying pivot and nobody says anything, I'm okay with saying pivot. So yeah, we changed our model to, oh my gosh, it's COVID. It's displacing people from around the planet. How can we build a model to bring these people together over a natural setting, which is food, which is dinner, which is picnics, which is hanging out with your colleagues at the restaurant? Well, we always come together around food. So we went from just doing cooking classes to building communities, with the centerpiece being food and beverage experiences, working a lot with businesses, a lot with nonprofit organizations, et cetera, and helping them bring those communities together that have been displaced, again, around that whole thing of food and beverage. And it's just been a wonderful journey. We now work with communities primarily North America, but we've connected with communities in the Middle East. In the UK, we're doing one soon with a community out of South Africa. And that's the beauty of virtual. This is all being done from Toronto. This is all being done by Vancouver, wherever the chefs happen to be. And so that's become our centerpiece as a chef, as a community agency centered around food.
Beautiful. And it's organic, right? I think
Yes.
So many people have moved into a space individually and even as business teams where we're working from home. People are you're seeing my big tree behind me, and we're kind of in a virtual world, but in some ways we're actually connecting in a deeper way, because
totally
we're seeing each other maybe more authentically, or we're not necessarily sort of in our not that I would wear a three-piece suit, but you know what I mean?
I totally
And,
get what you're saying.
standards are changing. So,
Yeah, they are.
I think
Well, it's
food is one of those things.
and it's one of those. I love that point that you made, Lisa, because with our chef team, the chefs work from their home. The chefs work from their own kitchens.
Ah,
And so when they're not working in commercialized kitchens, they're working on their home doing cooking programs, these culinary ChefTorial experiences with their phone connected to
wow.
some tripod. And so a customer, a guest, we call them guests, are seeing that chef in their own environment. They're in their own environment, so they're just hanging out in kitchens now. It's a big kitchen party that's virtual, and it works
We
really great.
we used to pay a lot more money to actually be with a chef
100%.
in their own kitchen.
100%. One of the ones I love to talk about, my partner, Samantha, she has family throughout North America. She brought them all together during Mother's Day.
Oh,
And
love it.
so there's the mom, just as happy as anything. She's got her family together for 2 hours around food and laughter and all those sorts of things. So, that's the community piece. It can be personal or it can be professional. And
I love it.
you've taken this conversation from business to now really what it's all about, was just resonating community together. And thank you. I'm increasing my tone of excitement around it because it's exactly what we do.
Well, and before we got on the call, what I was really processing a bit is this idea of the chef community that you have had for
Yes.
a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
and how the chef, I'm not a chef, I'm
Right.
hardly a good cook. My husband is the one that makes sure
Okay.
everything tastes really good in our kitchen, but
Nice.
really to have this group of people that are coming from a certain industry, they have a certain type, a passion for food, a passion for gathering people together in that way, and an
Yes.
expertise obviously around the
Mm-hmm.
food that they're creating. And then you've got the communities, the businesses, the nonprofits, the events that people want to be doing virtually.
Right.
Those communities are just longing for something unique and interesting, and
Yes.
some kind of a connection. So it's almost like a community build that you're doing over here with the chef community, and then you've got your clients and the people that are engaging in this as its
Yes.
own community. And I can imagine the sparks that must be flying, or new ideas that are coming out of those meetups. Could you maybe explain a little bit about the experience that people get when
Yes.
they're online?
Yeah, so the ChefTorial experience is real simple. We set up a menu that people that the host decides that they want to offer. So think about you're having your dinner party, whether it's a professional, it's for business or whatever, and you're the host of this event. We determine what the menu is going to look like ahead of time. And then what we do is we send out what we call a pre-experience conversation, which gets people ready to come to the dinner party. Well, obviously, you're not there to physically receive the food. You've got to make your own food. So here's the list of the food. This is how you prep it and so on. So you're going to get ready. When we come into your kitchen, you come to our kitchen, whatever, you're all wrecking, ready to go. You got your wine in your hand, and you're ready to connect with your colleagues, your friends, your guests, or whatever. And then we just take people through about an hour of we're gonna make bread together. Roll up your sleeves. This is not a couch cook experience. This is you playing in the game, and people love that. And then afterwards, we make bread, and then we break bread together. So there's conversation that happens with that whole piece. And then after it's over, we follow up. We do customer service. We prevent when I was in university, I remember the word post-purchase dissonance, and what that means is you take away the regret that I made a bad decision on investing in that. So we do follow up and the love in and so on. But you talk about, so that's how it works. And we do groups of up to 25 kitchens, 50 kitchens, or whatever as part of that. And they could be locally or it could be around the world. But I love that you talk about the chefs, because what's happening with the chefs is they are now coming out of the kitchen. You got to remember their lives are all about behind the scenes. And now what we're doing, we're actually bringing them, making them the hero with these communities. And so their sense of self-esteem, their sense of enjoyment, their sense of eliminating post-purchase dissonance is just through the roof, because they're enjoying bringing themselves into these other communities. The other thing that's happening with it is that a lot of these chefs in these communities, they're really, really struggling these days on all of the challenges that traditional food, restaurants, conventions, or whatever. And so we're giving them that breath of fresh air where we say, come hang out with us, make some money, hang out with some really cool people, and people are going to think you're the greatest thing, quote unquote, since sliced bread. So all of those other elements are playing from connecting those two communities together also.
And the variety and the perspectives, and you have so many different options in the menus that
Yes.
that really you could be doing this, or you're already doing this worldwide, but to expand
Yes.
and to have chefs, there's a beauty in being able to say, this is where I really shine, and this is where the chef
Yes.
so and so really shines, and it's like a beautiful smorgasbord.
It really is.
Of opportunity here. So
there's, and you talk about those honeypot. We were talking about the honeypot either. There's a community that we're connected to right now that represents farmers around North America, 8,100 farmers who are trying to sell their strawberries, their meat products, whatever, to the marketplace. And so I connect with those farmers to bring them to guests, to show them with our chefs as to how people can use their products. So now we got the farm community connecting to the chef community, connecting to the guest community. And it's so lovely that and everybody's winning. And the farmers are ecstatic about this because they get to see their customers eating their products. And so that's, it is unbelievable. And when I think about it on that level, thank you for telling me. I sometimes I'm in the weeds so much about making the relationship work. I forget the vision of what it is that we're trying to do. And of course, like any good relationship connection, it takes time to nurture it. And so you gotta make that investment.
And it also takes time to step back and really view the relationship for what it is. I had a chance,
right.
we chatted. I had a chance to go kayaking with my husband last week. It's fall here in Canada, and so not too many people at the lake, and it was silent and beautiful and empty, but it gave us a chance to really take that bird's eye view at our relationship and have time to talk, and even for your work as the connector to step back and say, wow, look at what's been developed over this time. It's been 18, 20 months or whatever it's been now. Yep. Tell us a little bit about you as a natural connector when you were younger. I would love to hear a little bit more about how that was showing up for you when you were, might be a kid, might be when you were a young adult, getting into, I'm sure you've always had your hands in some kind of honey pot, but tell us how that was showing up for you when you were younger.
Thank you for this memory that you're taking me on right now. So, I've always had, now looking back, I guess that I've never shied away from going into new environments. And two that come up in particular for me to really explain about how I connect and how I nurture those relationships is that when I went to high school, all my friends went to one high school. I went to another one, me and another guy. So I went into this high school of 1,800 kids, knew two people, ended up being the president of the student council 3 years later. When I went to university, I knew two people at the university, 1,500 people. I went in there, was the vice president of the student council and won awards and so on. And so I talk about that because it's the connection piece that allowed that all to happen. And it ultimately comes back to, one, I like to make people laugh. I really like
sense of humor. That's a good thing.
Sense of humor is there. It's a natural flow of that becomes just part of my DNA. I've been blessed with this ability to converse and to listen. That's the other piece. And the other thing that's happened is that I'm one for including people in conversations. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I'm in a group of people and somebody's talking and they only talk to one person in the group of six. Like, what about the rest of us? And naturally, I go towards Lisa, tell us what you think. And if I'm the lead of the conversation, I'll bring people into the conversation and just reflecting on, and it's just all natural. It really is just natural that comes to me because it makes me feel uncomfortable if that environment isn't happening. It's an inclusive process that I go through. You know, I've been blessed with the ability to have a stage presence. There was a strategy behind it. I wasn't willing just to sit back and wait for connections to come to me in those environments. Think about it, new 2 people in communities of 1,800, 1,500 people. I went out into the marketplace, and that's what I tell my coaching, the people I coach in entrepreneurship. You got to get out there, and you got to be purposeful with it, and you got to take ownership of it, and you got to listen. You can't just talk about yourself. Because I've been in those other environments where this summer there was a situation that there was this individual, all he did was just talk about himself the entire time that we were together. I'm like, I want nothing to do with that. So I'm smart enough to walk away from connections that aren't nurturing. And so I lean into nurturing. I walk away from those that don't. That's served me that ability to grow those communities where I may not have seen somebody for years. Like my best friend, I grew up in Mike McGinnis is his name. We ran bikes together in grade 3. And, you know, I could call him up right now and it would still be the emotional connection we had as 2 boys hanging out with each other. We were laughing, Smith and I were laughing about that the other day. Remember, Lisa, when you would actually go to someone's house and knock on the door and say, "Hi, can Lisa come out and play today?" and your mom would say, "No, she's grounded, sorry." And you say, "Okay, no big." Remember those days? So anyway, so there's Mike McGinnis. Him and I are like in those scenarios. But I think that's examples of journeys which I keep nurturing.
Well, and the intentionality of pulling people in where it doesn't happen by chance. I truly believe that, because I think if we go the natural path where we're unconsciously moving through the high school or moving through your university, and we'll naturally go to the people we know, 3 people, 5 people, or whatever it is. That it's natural, and you see that in networking events, even where you'll see the clusters happening, and it almost defeats the purpose, because if we aren't being, it takes a little bravery and maybe some courage, and it might take some humility to listen and to take the time. But what I'm hearing from you is that it's really an intentional process for you, where you're watching and you're observing and you're listening and you're taking in, and then to be able to say, Jim, what do you think about that? It means you've listened to what's just been said, and then you're feeling out where you can continue the conversation without you being one fueling everything about that conversation.
Yeah, let me just talk about that if I could for a sec. One of the ways I have adjusted in my approach to that conversation, our natural go-to is for people to say, "What do you do?" That's naturally what we do when we meet somebody. And what people do is they attach titles to it. I'm a real estate agent, I'm a stay-at-home mom or whatever. And I've changed that. My go-to question when I first meet people is, "So what's your story?" And they say, "What do you mean my story?" And I said, "Well, what's going on in your life?" And they pick the thing that's important to them.
Yes.
And that's where you zero in to come back in that conversation. I'm more, when I'm getting, people are asking me a question, my natural go-to is, I don't like it. I want to talk about them. And that's a great way to start off with, "What's your story?" They tell you and dig deep into that, and you don't have to say anything. They'll think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread because you made that connection to them, what's important. The other piece that I would encourage your listeners to do is, you see all the time, like, press the like button, press the button. Go back with a comment. Just all you got is go back with a comment and connect with somebody in a communicative way versus a thumbs up way. Anybody can do thumbs up. That's lazy connection. Good connection is actual that tell me your story.
I love it. I feel so strongly that good connections can happen without a lot of effort. And I think sometimes we play this up to be the masters, like you, the people that have done this forever, like myself or my family. Like I grew up in a family of connectors. But the beauty of when you start to see people be seen, we're starting a program called the Connection Architect, and our culture that I am hoping and working hard to build and really excited about seeing already bubbling is this idea that we all can be seen, heard, and considered. And the
Love it.
importance of us leaning in. It seems so simple, but if we're conscious and intentional about it, it will take steps and shifts in how we actually talk to people, like what you're saying. Like I used to actually be one of those space fillers where if there was a break in the conversation and it was a little bit of that awkward pause, then I'll find something, to weave in there. And I've learned to actually hang back, like let somebody else fill the space, or maybe somebody's processing and they're not quite sure what's next for them. So I love what you're saying here. So much that is going on in your world. And I know we're just about at time here, but I would love for you to share with the listeners today, maybe one thing that you would encourage them as looking at how they can connect better in their communities. Maybe one thing that you could leave with them, and a little bit about where they can find you and ChefTorial.
Yeah, you're sweet. Thank you for that. So when you ask that question, I think of a friend of mine, a great friend of mine, a wonderful voice. But one time he went to Germany and he was on there on a business trip, and he went to a conference, and he came back and he says, I ran out of business cards, Rivers. I gave out all of my 250 business cards, and his whole purpose was to just say, here's my business card, and then get to the next person. He wasn't diving into understanding the relationship. And so my challenge back to him was, well, that's fantastic. What are you doing next? And he had no follow-up plan, right? There's no flow. So my point is, be intentional with one or two in your community first. You don't have to run them all. And it's, it's so easy to say it, but my point is when you go and connect with your community, start with one person and be intentional with that relationship. And in the old days when we used to network, everybody, I got to get into a room and I got to talk to one person, have a great conversation, and leave. And there you had success. That's really what I think I would leave your listeners. It's one at a time, but find those that also give you value back. If you're not being filled in a relationship, you can't give to a relationship. Just doesn't happen. So how you find out with me, you want to hang out with me just as, an entrepreneur guy, you go just riverscorbett.ca. That's my LinkedIn profile. And then if you want to find out about hanging out with me, an amazing team of chefs, you just go to ChefTorial.com, and we'll be pleased to have you visit us. And that's it. This is intentional. I'm being humble. You're humbleizing me right now. Thank you, Lisa. It's great chatting with you.
Oh, I love this conversation, and I'm sure there'll be more. We've had several great conversations about this in the past, and as things again morph and change, and we're looking at new ways to connect in 2022. I'm excited to see where you're going to be going in the months and the years to come. So thanks so much for being with me today.
Back at you, my friend. Thank you.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.